Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What's going on, Internet? It is Eric Banholtz here, founder of Beard Brand, and you're listening to another e-commerce conversation. We are on part 2 of our mini-part series on how to build an e-commerce business. Today, I've got a special friend of mine and a longtime vendor, Carson McComas with Fuel Made. How's it going, Carson?
I'm doing great, Eric. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it's this is going to be a fun topic because I'm kind of a techie at heart, and I love technology. I used to be a web designer, web developer, and I've slowly kind of let go of those feelings. So I love technology, and of course, I love e-commerce. And at the root of every e-commerce business is the e-commerce platform. So why don't you give us a little brief overview about your business, how long you've been doing it, and kind of your specialties?
Yeah, so we are Fuel Made. We're a digital agency. Our focus is specifically on e-commerce. The platforms that we work with are on the e-commerce side. It's Shopify, so we're a Shopify Plus partner. So we work a lot with Shopify, and then we also are a Klaviyo Platinum partner. So Klaviyo is an email automation tool specifically designed for e-commerce. So those are kind of our two big focuses. I've been in the industry. I started my company back in 2000, so I'm kind of a dinosaur. I've been around for a long time, but really kind of locked in on e-commerce and Shopify for about the last 8 years or so. And yeah, that's kind of our space.
I mean, 8 years ago, that was 2010, and Shopify was really, really early in those days. Like, how did you have the confidence to pick Shopify as a partner platform?
That's a good question. In the early days, there were a few, the options were pretty slim, and having sort of a design focus to what we wanted to do, I could never find a platform that gave us the flexibility to do what we wanted. And so in those early days, we were like creating our own e-commerce platform, just so we had the flexibility on the design side. It wasn't very robust, but it was sufficient. And as Shopify came on the scene, they really came on with this promise of giving design flexibility. And that was really important to us. And so I really keyed into them in early days and was early in on the beta and kind of following them along for a long time. And we finally had an opportunity where I just explained to a client, I said, look, we're going to give this a try on Shopify. If you're okay with that, we'd like to build your shop on Shopify. If it doesn't work out, we'll build it again on another platform. So it was fairly low risk for them, except for the time. And they were game and gave us the thumbs up. And so we built that first site on Shopify and fell in love. Really, it was such a great platform to work with even back then. And sort of the rest is history. From there, we started doing all of our e-commerce sites on there. And then pretty soon we were only doing e-commerce and only doing it on Shopify. And I've been pretty happy with it. Actually, it's been a really solid platform for just about everything we've thrown at it.
I go back some years with e-commerce as well, and I'm cheap at heart, right? So I always lean toward open source, and of course, on open source, you kind of have two platform options: Magento and WordPress, and specifically, I guess, like WooCommerce. And what I loved about that was just being able to get up for literally like your hosting at the time, which was like $25 a month or $10 a month on a shared hosting platform. And what I quickly found, especially on Magento, now this was back in 2000, probably about 2010, was Magento would just crash. It would just like use all the resources of the server.
Yes, lots of stories like that, and that unfortunately that still plagues a lot of folks working with Magento. You really have to know what you're doing and have the right team behind it to kind of keep it from doing that.
So for me, that was like my lesson learned is like I don't I don't think I'm going to bring value to the marketplace by being an e-commerce development firm. Like my technology stack is not going to be the differentiator. So allow some other team to do it at a house, and then focus on my products and focus on building the business. And that's why we ultimately landed on Shopify, and why I imagine a lot of other people do.
Yeah, that's a familiar story. I think sort of the difference between self-hosting and what I hear from a lot of Magento folks, and we've done a lot of Magento migrations, is I'm tired of being an IT company. I want to be an e-commerce company. I want to focus on product and customer experience and that sort of thing. And that's something Shopify has done a good job, is kind of taking that technical burden off of store owners. So yeah, that's been a good play there.
So if someone's completely new to this game, they're going to be looking at the market. What are all the big players in e-commerce from a platform standpoint?
Yeah, I would say there's kind of a couple of big players on the self-hosted. So we've talked about one of them, that's Magento. The other one, which you mentioned as well, is WooCommerce. They're kind of the biggest players, really, in terms of market share and sort of ecosystem around them. In terms of a SaaS model, so a hosted solution, it would be Shopify and BigCommerce are really the big players there. And there's advantages and disadvantages to all of those folks, but they constitute really the majority of the market, those four players right now in e-commerce.
Now, like from a perspective of being a complete newbie, maybe the listeners out there, they don't have the budget to work with a firm like FieldMade or a web designer. They're looking to do it themselves. I know you're inherently biased towards Shopify, but maybe you could give just like a little more details as to what kind of things they should be looking for in a platform and why those things are important.
Yeah, and I will definitely confess a bias towards Shopify, but I would say that the things that you want to look for are it needs to be a solution that will allow you to focus on the things that really matter, which is creating good products and creating good assets and creating good customer experience and sort of streamlining that commerce process, and not spending as much time in the weeds from a technical standpoint. So that again, that's kind of a pitch for Shopify. BigCommerce will do some of those things as well. WooCommerce, if you want to stay open source and you love the WordPress world, there are lots of successful shops on WooCommerce. It can be okay, but I think you need a little bit more technical sophistication or interest if you're going to go that direction. Magento, I wouldn't even think about that for sort of a startup setup. That's way too involved and technically deep, and growth on there would be very expensive. I probably wouldn't look that way when it comes to just starting out from scratch.
One of the big movements, or at least they were a few years ago, was this whole like subscription box type of platform, and it, the Dollar Shave Clubs of the world and Birchboxes of the world. Are there any platforms that are going to be better for that, or any kind of solutions?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the name of the big subscription player out there right now. It doesn't come to me, but what we found, again, this will tap into my knowledge, but on Shopify, there are a couple of apps that help you build a pretty robust subscription service. And you're using one of them, which is Recharge. And there's another one from Bold Commerce, recurring billing app. And both of those are pretty good for doing kind of that subscription model. And you can even do the subscription box approach with those. They were kind of built for that. At some point here, the name of the other player might pop in my... Oh, Cratejoy. Thank you. That was it. Cratejoy. Yes, Cratejoy. So that's another one to look at. I've got a good friend who runs a very successful monthly subscription box company, and he's using Cratejoy, and it works fine.
Yeah, they're another Austin, Texas company here, and Amir, who runs that. We worked with him in the very early days when their business strategy was a little bit different, and we were trying our own kind of subscription box plan. But for us, what we needed was more of a auto renew rather than a monthly subscription box. And
right. Yeah, Recharge and at least on the Shopify side, the Recharge and recurring billing app are both well suited for that.
Cool. So let's maybe shift the gears a little bit and kind of talk about working with web designers? I know there's a lot of options out there between working with a partner like you that's a Shopify. Does Shopify have statuses for their partners?
Yes, they sort of do. So they've got what they call Shopify partners, which is sort of the beginning layer. You don't have to have proven much to become. I think anybody can become a Shopify partner. Then you become a Shopify expert, which you have to have reached some certain internal metrics in terms of number of sites built and that sort of thing. And then there's Shopify Plus partner, which is where we are. That's where you have to have done. You have to be at another level. And so, yeah, there's kind of those three different tiers there.
As a person's looking to build up their platform, what should they be looking for as they reach out to web designers, get quotes on their projects? What kind of budget is realistic for a web designer to build out an e-commerce platform?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that, the first thing I would do if I were starting out, honestly, I wouldn't necessarily look for a web designer to begin with. Unless you just don't want to deal with it and you've got some budget to spend on it. But you can actually get pretty far by just grabbing a theme from the theme store on Shopify. WooCommerce has themes as well, so does BigCommerce. Even Magento does. So you can grab in the Shopify world, you can grab a theme. It's going to cost you a couple $100, or there's free ones. You can get that set up, and as long as you've got good photography, you can get pretty far with that. You can get pretty far with that even without a web designer in the mix. The time to start folding a web designer in is when you need help to kind of take it to the next level. So you've got traction, you've got some product market fit, and you're looking to sort of grow from there. At that point, I think it makes sense to bring in a designer. And, design, I think when you're looking at a designer, a design it's more about it's about more than just how it looks. A good web designer is thinking about how it works and how it flows. And so you want to find somebody who can kind of help you with those things as well. I think in terms of budget, there's kind of three levels. So there's the DIY sort of, which is the cost of the theme and, some of your time to get it all set up. The second one would be bringing somebody in to help you maybe improve on your theme or modify your theme. You could probably get that for a few $1,000s, or I would say, and then the level above that would be a fully custom. So you don't want to grab a theme from the theme store. You want something unique. And I would say, unless you're ready to spend maybe $30,000 or more, you're probably better off trying to work with a theme. That's kind of where I would say that's kind of a cutoff point. Does that help?
Yeah. I mean, that's totally the pathway we took. We started off with one of the free themes of Shopify. I think our out the door budget when we got started at Beard Brand was $30. And of course, it's not entirely fair because I used to be kind of like one of those DIY guys, a do-it-yourself web designer, self-taught. Everything I learned was from like YouTube and Googling solutions. And then I think what's really important from an e-commerce perspective, especially in design, is just like being anal retentive about absolutely everything. Like, so every photograph has to be the same ratio, right? They all have to be 1:1 or 4:3, or it doesn't matter what it is. They just have to be consistent. And you can't have that 1:1.12 or some weird ratio. So that's a big thing. And then the other thing is like with that photography, it just has to be in the exact same location. And those just small, particular details are going to just completely shift the professionalism of your website.
100%. In fact, I would say, the design of the site is important. Again, especially if you're just starting out, look in the theme store. You're going to find it. You'll be able to find a theme that you like, most likely, and then invest in photography and doing the stuff that you're talking about, Eric. Invest in packaging and good copywriting. Invest in starting that process of building community. And that's something we could talk about too, but you want to invest in an exceptional product and really invest in the customer experience. Those things are all more important, I would say, than building an expensive custom site. Is just get those fundamentals right. Get the assets and the content of the site right. Then you can build on that. You can always wrap that in a new theme down the road.
One thing I wanted to talk about as you build your website, it's so easy when you're sitting at your computer to think about like the desktop version. But what I've noticed is like mobile really grabbing a lot of steam. Is that something that consumers or entrepreneurs should really put at a higher priority than desktop?
In almost all cases, yes. Now there are, we have, for example, we've got some clients that sell, bathroom hardware to interior designers, and those folks aren't spending as much time on mobile. But boy, I would say 85% of our clients, the majority of their traffic is mobile. Yeah, mobile is really that's most people's first touch point for a brand. That's often where they start to have that start to build that initial relationship. Mobile is huge. And I wouldn't even consider building a site without thinking about mobile first in this day and age. It's critical.
Let's talk about the alternatives, right? We know the big platforms, the Magentos, Shopify, BigCommerce. Obviously, there's alternatives if you want to dip your toes into e-commerce, and that would be utilizing something like an Etsy or Amazon or eBay, I guess, is the other big one. Like, how is an entrepreneur going to build a business on their own domain versus utilizing one of these other platforms?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's more a question of what kind of a business do you want to be in? You can make, there's a lot of people making good money on Amazon if you kind of play your cards right. It's not a very fun model, in my opinion. It's sort of a race to the bottom, but there's opportunity there. And I'm not a deep expert on that, but if that's an interesting model, there's certainly opportunities on Amazon and eBay. Etsy is a little bit more, I think, custom, if you will, in terms of building community and stuff than Amazon, although it would still make me nervous. But if you want, it's interesting. I was reading an article the other day by somebody was quoting the CEO of Glossier, Emily Weiss. Yeah. And she said that Amazon has solved buying, but they've broken shopping. I really love that insight. That's really sharp. And I think if you just want to get custom, like I'm going to go look for a toilet brush, I'm going to hit Amazon, right? And if you want to sell me toilet brushes and try to, make a play at that can work. That's not the kind of business that gets me excited, but it certainly can work. And there's a lot of people making money. But if you want a shopping experience, if you want community, if you want longevity and kind of a lasting brand play, I think that's when you build on your own domain. If you want to hit the gold rush on Amazon, go for it. But if you want to build something that I think would be a longer play, that's when I think you look at building on your own domain.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I'm pretty vocal about my preference for building on your own domain, and really, there is a lot of risk in building on Amazon that they could, kill your product or flag you for doing something wrong. Then all of a sudden you're off the platform and all your revenue goes away. But to be fair, Google could change something with their algorithm where all the SEO you build up. I've actually, it's almost counterintuitive to me, but I've read that Amazon businesses are actually getting higher multiples in their valuations than like standalone e-commerce businesses.
It's interesting. I've done I think like any e-commerce space entrepreneur, or at least most of them, I'm constantly kind of looking at them. I'd love to, make an acquisition of the right e-commerce brand. And I'm kind of looking at those things all the time. I think in what I'm finding is if you have all of your eggs in the Amazon basket, I'm noticing that there's some hesitancy. I think your multiple would be a little stressed if you were strictly on Amazon. I know even for myself, I don't even look at those if they're 100% Amazon. And I know I'm not alone. And in talking to some brokers and stuff, I think there's a shift toward looking for more diversity and not quite as much risk of on that Amazon play. Now, my exposure is limited. I don't have the whole landscape in my mind, but that's kind of what I've seen.
Yeah. What are, bringing it back to building on your own platform, what are some like really innovative type of design elements or features that are being integrated into websites nowadays that users can use either as inspiration for their own brand or kind of like was it like your pin board, build your pin board of beautiful websites? Not just beautiful, but like cool features.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, but most of the things that are interesting to me that I see are exceptional use of photography and assets, and sometimes illustration and storytelling. Doing really strong storytelling, it seems to be very effective. Allbirds is nailing this right now as a good example. Nailing the mobile experience, I think, is, as we mentioned, is key. If you can get good integration with social, and you want to, again, you want to build community. And so e-commerce sites that are building that sense of community and storytelling, so that people come to the site, that it's a cohesive experience from mobile to the website, and from the website back to mobile. I should say, when I say mobile, I mean social, like Instagram. So if I'm coming from Instagram, I hit the site and I go back to Instagram. That's a cohesive story, and those things are kind of tied together, and I start to feel like I'm part of what's going on there. Those are some of the interesting things that we're seeing, and there's some interesting design trends, I think, that are happening out there, that are fun. We go to commercecream.com. Those guys are sort of curating a set of e-commerce sites. They have a Shopify bent too. I think all of their sites are on Shopify, but they've got a good example, and I kind of look through there periodically and see what new interesting things are being done by different brands, and it's pretty inspiring and pretty fun. People are getting pretty creative, even though I feel like we've been in this for a while, but there's still a lot of creativity to be done.
Yeah, I would say one of, and this may say something about who I am as a person, but Soylent, I really love what they do, because they do integrate that subscription model as well as that single buy. Beautiful photography. They have just like very subtle animations that bring like life to the website without being kind of like in your face or like distracting.
Yeah, they're a good example of kind of those, what you had mentioned earlier on our conversation here, of those little touches, just like being really dialed into all of the little pieces and really getting everything right. And they're doing it with somebody really creative behind the scenes to kind of figure out what those are. And they've got a great vibe too.
Let's kind of spin it a little bit and talk about like bringing people to your website. I know you mentioned earlier that you're a Klaviyo partner. What is Klaviyo for those who may not be familiar?
So Klaviyo is focused on creating automated email marketing sequences. So for example, when somebody comes to your site, you can capture their email address and send them a series of emails that educate them about your product and start to pull them into your community. And really the goal is to really pull them into your community, get them to make that first purchase. And then you can do additional sequences. So after their first purchase, you're sending them another sequence. In the case of Beard Brand, if they're buying a beard oil, you're going to send them an email sequence that educates them about that beard oil and encourages them to replenish when that time comes. And there's a lot of different segmentation and personalization that you can do with automated email marketing. And Klaviyo is just the tool that we use to do that. There are other ones out there. We were a little partial to Klaviyo, but it's that's what it's about.
What are some best practices of being able to acquire those email addresses on the website so you can get them into that flow?
It's I'll put this in order of most effective to less, but obviously this varies based on your goals. And talking to you specifically, I'm sure you'll have an opinion here. The most effective thing to do is to make sure that they're seeing that email opt-in, and you're giving them some kind of an offer. So after I don't like greeting them with an email opt-in. That feels pretty obnoxious. It's like asking for a kiss before the first date. But once they've been on the site, hitting them with a pop-up or hitting them with something that kind of slides up or down on the screen and says, hey, do you want 15% off? Click here and give us your email address. Or do you want a free gift? And you don't always have to give away a percentage. You can, you don't have to give away margin. You could add a free gift, or you could give a guide or something like that. So just something that's enticing, but doing it in a way so that they see that email capture request. That tends to be pretty effective in terms of best practices. That's the most effective way to get it in there. You can also be more subtle. Like if you just have a subscription box in your footer, that's going to be that you're going to convert fewer folks, but it's possible. And then you can do other things that are more effective, like running contests, and you've seen Wheelio and some of those things. I kind of find those things to be obnoxious, and I know I'm not alone. It depends on your brand. If your brand is well suited to that, it can be extremely effective. But not every brand would fit with that.
Yeah, I mean, my thought on pop-ups and wheelios and things like that are, I tend not to think very highly of them. And of course, as you know, we don't do discounts. So I agree that you have to give them a reason that they want to join, right? You can't just say, give us your email address and expect people to do it. But for us, it leans on a lot of education and information and guidance.
And we do the same thing. Like if you go to, even on our website, we do ours pretty similar to yours, Eric. We've got a little thing that shows up at the top. Like right now we're giving away a holiday checklist PDF guide thing. And it's a little bit more subtle because I'm with you. Depending on your audience, getting in their face and popping up and doing some of that stuff can actually tarnish your brand.
And again, going back to the beauty of Shopify is like there are plugins to allow you to do these pop-ups where you essentially just a couple clicks away.
Exactly. We like, there's several we like. We like Just Uno is a pretty good one. That's the one that we've started to gravitate toward when it comes to kind of an app offering. You can custom build them in, but you don't need to spend the effort to do that with a good app solution like Just Uno.
What about GDPR compliance? Is that something that you're seeing a lot of?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big push for that was a little earlier when the law was coming online, and there are things that you can't do anymore. It doesn't affect the U.S., so if you're catering to customers in the U.S., which not everybody is, of course, it isn't as much of a concern. But if you are catering to folks who are part of the GDPR law, you do need to. There are compliance things that you need to do, and most of these, like Just Uno and others, they're going to give you some direction and help on being compliant. And you need to think about the offer that you're making. And for example, you can't, with GDPR, you can't say, hey, give us your email address and we'll let you download this ebook, but we're also going to put you on our email list. They've got to opt into both of those things. So there are a lot of little things that are part of GDPR. To be honest, the whole law feels pretty silly once you kind of understand it, but it's the law. So some compliance is important, especially if you're catering to folks in that geographic area.
Yeah, and just to kind of like rehash on what GDPR is, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's basically the European Union is trying to protect the privacy of Europeans, and that's why you've been seeing all these cookie banners asking for permission to do this, and you got all these emails back, and I believe it was in May, right?
Yeah, where everybody got 200 emails in one day and like, oh, I didn't realize it was on all those email lists. Yeah, that day.
Yeah. So GDPR is the regulation that's really driving that. And it is a little overarching, and I think it puts more pressure on larger companies like Facebook and Google, who have really kind of fallen under the microscope of not really supporting the privacy rights of individuals. But it is a little more lenient for smaller brands and smaller companies.
And there's a lot of good information that's been written about it out there. If you do a little Googling around, you can find some good guidelines. It's a little convoluted, but a little work, you can at least get the broad strokes so you can comply with it.
What are I want to wrap it up kind of with like two things, but the first thing is like really what is the biggest mistake? And maybe we alluded to it a little bit earlier today, but what is like, do not do this when it comes to building an e-commerce website?
Yeah, we have kind of talked about some of these, but I'll just, that come to mind. Let me touch on a few. One, again, not investing in assets, not investing in good photography and copy, seeing that as an expense and not part of your, brand and story that brings a return. Not designing well for mobile. That's a huge mistake. If you don't do that, you're in big trouble. I would say another one is, things that we see. So we're very focused on sort of improving conversion rate and other metrics like that. And so, we see people, especially when they start out, they don't think about things like return policy or shipping policy, and they're not communicating those, or maybe they're shipping rates are hidden until they get into checkout. Those are some mistakes that are pretty easy to avoid, but have a pretty detrimental impact if you make them. So that's the other thing I would say. A mistake is not thinking long term, like not thinking about an e-commerce business. Again, I'm thinking, the world we live in, which is you're going to host this maybe on Shopify or some similar, not on Amazon. In other words, is not thinking about that this is the start of a relationship with a customer. Once you've got that customer, you want to hang on to them, and so from very early on, you want to be, in my view, you want to be collecting an email address. You want to be connecting them to your social. You want to be engaging with them so that they can, be repeat customers. And even if they're not going to be repeat customers, they're going to talk about you and feel like they're part of what you've got going on. So I think a mistake is just not thinking long term, not thinking about this as the start of a relationship with a customer. There's a lot of other little things that I could carry on about, but those are kind of the big ones.
Yeah, I think you really hit the head on the, hit the hammer on the nail? Hit the hammer on the head?
Nail on the head?
Anyways. Yeah.
There was a hammer in the head somewhere.
Yeah, something like that. But basically those assets are really that important, and that story is really that important. And think of your website and your business, not just the website, but your entire business that way. How are you going to bring value to people's lives? Before we sign off, if people want to contact you or learn more about your business, where should they find all that information?
So we are at fuelmade.com, and I can also be reached on Twitter. I'm Carson on Twitter. Got in nice and early with that handle.
Carson, really?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yep. And you're
like OG.
That's right. Yeah, definitely. Also FuelMade on Twitter. So would love to engage with anybody on any of those ways.
Well, before we sign off, I want to give one last story and maybe a recommendation for Carson. We launched a brand new website with FuelMade and Carson back in 2015, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Was it? And I told him that I had a deadline for, what was it, like September 28th or something like that. And we were going to launch on that date. No matter what. And I remember laying on my floor in my bedroom, communicating with Carson at my time. Central was probably like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
How late did we stay up?
Oh, yeah. It was at least that late. Yeah. It was a late night. I remember that. It was a late night.
So I know on your end, to have a vendor who's willing to do what it takes and stand by his word, you are highly regarded. We've worked with you nonstop since that time period and have nothing but positive things to say. So if you are on the higher end of things and you're looking for a new website, or if you're looking for significant work being done, I would really highly recommend FuelMade and Carson and the team that he's built over there. Just amazing people. And they know what things will take. They give you fair expectations for how long it will take, and then they deliver on it.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. I really appreciate that. Very gracious.
Well, thank you for being on the show, and thank all of our listeners for taking the time to learn about this. We really appreciate it. And I don't have a good exit sign off yet, but it's still coming along. So any recommendations for that, Carson?
I don't know. How do you outro your YouTube clips?
Well, I just tell them to keep on growing.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Okay.
Say, thanks for listening.
That applies.
Cheers.
That applies.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Cheers. And keep on growing.